the idea of colorism. I guess this isn't necessarily just specific to Asian people, because I know in the Black community, there's definitely still some stuff around, and Latino community, a lot of minority communities, right? The lighter skin you are, there is kind of like preferential treatment or kind of like pedestaling of that. But in the specific context of Asia, our countries are the ones that are obsessed with like whitening our skin, for example. Like, not just if you were born lighter skin, you're treated better, but like we have like crazy amounts of beauty products that are out in the market that are meant to like physically color your skin whiter. Some even have bleach in them to do that. So there's this like really big obsession around being as white in color as you can, but it is not really grounded in Western stuff. This is like where we have to dissect where we come from, because I think it's really easy as like Americans to come at it and be like, oh, look at these Asians, they like idolize white people, so they're trying to be white. But colorism is so old of a concept in Asia that it like predates European settlement anywhere. It largely comes from the classist divide of like, were you poor and therefore working out in the fields and therefore tanned and dark, or were you richer and higher society and able to stay indoors without having to do manual labor and therefore very like light skinned and pale? So that's like where it originated from, and I think it is still largely where this idea of colorism is rooted, is more of a class and like socioeconomic thing than like a trying to be white thing.
I think I agree with you. I think there's plenty of historical context that shows. I think it's funny because there's a lot of parallels. I would gander to say that the idea of being pale and indoors versus tanned and outdoors largely is the same for Europeans, but I agree with you in the sense that they're not like influencing concepts. It's just kind of like how it also came about in Asia as well.
Maybe, although, because Europe is broad, right? But like, for example, Italians can get really dark in skin, and
That's
Greek
true.
people, like a lot of Europeans, and they're not seen as like lower class because they're tan, for example. Like,
Mm-mm-mm.
even creeping into modern day, right? Like, those types of Europeans aspire to be pretty
Oh
tan.
yeah.
It's like they go tanning, versus Asians are still really obsessed with like, they'll wear long sleeves even in like 95-degree weather.
Yes.
They'll carry umbrellas and like
Yes.
all this crazy shit to avoid being tanned. I wanted to just like make sure we like put that aside, because that's like a whole separate thing, I think, than like traditional racism, because it is based more on socioeconomic things.
Mm-hmm.
However, there's like a Venn diagram, I think, with like the racist element as well, which is that then there's this whole like East Asia versus Southeast Asia versus South Asia thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know when it really started, but like the idea of a lot of Southeast Asians becoming immigrants into East Asia and taking on the more kind of like the manual labor type
Mm-hmm.
class folk. So I think there is a little bit of Venn diagram with like the colorism racism thing in modern day, because it is more common, I think, for Southeast Asians to be tan. And I do know this is where like people were really getting hot and heated with disputing the different treatment based on type of Asian you are thing in East Asia, where they're like, nah, Southeast Asians are like explicitly discriminated against in East Asia. So I think there's a little bit of like both playing with that. There's looking down at the Southeast Asian countries, and also there's probably some colorism like mixed in there, just because the people from those countries are like more likely to be tan than East Asian folk.
It's all kind of connected because I think after a certain while, a certain appearance or a certain kind of person can be associated with a specific socioeconomic class, and that can be tied to how the person looks. So, for example, when you talk about the inner city, I think a lot of people will imagine like poor Black families. And so that's a situation where it's not even like you're thinking about racism from the perspective of how the person looks, but you're thinking about like a socioeconomic setting and you're filling that in with a specific, like the way a specific person looks.
Yeah, colorism's more tied to socioeconomic than anything to do with race.
Mm.
But I was saying that when it comes to Southeast Asians in East Asia, there was a crossover because they, as immigrants within East Asia, largely make up a lower
Mm-hmm.
socioeconomic class,
Yep.
and they are more likely to be tan
Mm-hmm.
than East Asians on like a whole. I don't know like where the migration pattern necessarily has gone from like Southeast Asia into East Asia, but something we've like loosely talked about before is Filipinos, for example, are like a big migrant class into Taiwan, which
Mm.
is where our families are from. I know a few people, I think like friends of friends that are like that have like older
Oh.
grandparents or whatever, and they have like full-time help that like live with them and they're Filipino. And my dad has even told me, he's like, when I am like too old to function and like need like hospice care, essentially, he was like, you should just move me back to Taiwan because it's actually affordable to have full time help there
Huh.
because essentially you can hire like a Filipina woman to like live with you
Oh
and
wow.
just take it's like a very common occupation that they have in
Yeah.
Taiwan.
It's
Yeah.
so interesting because we also have a huge class of nurses here that are Filipino. And I feel like they're also being brought over in a kind of caretaker situation role. I'm like curious why that is.
Yeah, I have no idea if y'all are Filipino,
Yeah.
weigh in here. It seems like medical industry, like that kind of
Caretaking.
stuff
Yeah.
is pretty big
Yeah.
within those migrant groups. Yeah. I talked about how Southeast Asians, like there's that crossover. They're more likely to be lower in socioeconomic class as migrants and also darker. But it's not a hard and fast rule because somebody also slid into the comments to be like, no, you don't know what you're talking about because this is why Lisa from Blackpink, that like uber famous girl group in K-pop. She's the Thai girl. What? But I was like, isn't she like really beloved because she's I mean, I'm gonna offend all the Blackpink fans right now, but like for my POV, it feels like she has like the most personality because she is different and she does the rapping and
Mm-mm.
like she's really good at dancing and blah blah. Anyways, I thought maybe if you're like famous, like you kind of get to break out from these like more stereotypical potential forms of discrimination. But no, this person who I think was Korean like slid in and was like, no, you don't know what you're talking about because Lisa constantly has fans like yelling slurs at her and like throwing stuff at her on the stage so that they can see Jisoo, the Korean girl, because Lisa's not Korean.
Wow.
And I was like, what?
The
So
fandom be
yeah,
toxic.
I know. So it was a little wild to me to hear that even when you are famous, you're not necessarily able to escape that in a homogenous Asian society.
I feel like there's always this outsiderness, and that's why we say like racism is so pernicious, because there's never any security regardless of like where you get in life. Like I remember maybe like last summer or 2 summers ago, there were like ongoing protests and stuff, and the police like arrested a bunch of city council members who were black. And they were like, we're city council members, we're here like legally protesting, and they got arrested anyway. So like it just goes to show, I think, no matter where your station is, how far you rise in any direction, like that kind of thing can still happen to you, and your position, regardless of whether it's a political position or you have like high economic class, like that doesn't necessarily change people's opinion of you based off of how you look.
I think that's largely true. Like, you can't really get rid of what people really feel deep down, right? And how they're going to act accordingly. However, I do think it is slightly different in the US because, no offense to politicians who may be listening, but like city council members are not like famous people. You know what I mean? Like, Beyonce and like Michael Jordan and like all the people that like really rose to the top of like pop culture in fame are idolized to a degree that their race is not the first thing people consider. So I think in the US, maybe it's because we're so capitalist. I don't know, like where does it come from? But like, and we're so obsessed with fame. But like, I do think when you have broken into the upper echelon of fame and celebrity is the kind of like the only place where you are more able to escape the more traditional kind of like bullshit that someone of your race might deal with normally
Mm,
because wealth supersedes race in a
sure.
way. But that's where it's like interesting to me that then like Lisa from Blackpink, who is like one of the most famous people in the world and certainly in Korea,
Mm,
is still treated like this pretty frequently from what that guy was
mm,
saying
mm, mm.
on TikTok. So that's where I'm kind of like, it feels different than it would be in the US.